Hey folks, this is Tron Games, and welcome to Total War Warhammer 3. Today we're going to do a video guide to the Seducers of Slaanesh and the Lord Ankari. Um, Slaanesh is really quite an interesting faction. They have this function, or this kind of effect that they call devotees, so you raid, loot, sack settlements, um, and this causes basically them to build up for your faction. You can use the devotees for quite a few different things. You can spend them on pleasurable acts, you can use them to establish cults in different lands, you can use them to raise disciple armies. Yeah, there's quite a few different things you can use devotees for. They tend to be quite a good mechanic. But there is also kind of other interesting mechanics for Slaanesh that are just very, very strange compared to other factions. So Slaanesh has the ability to vassalize human, elf, or beastmen factions. So you get additional income from doing that. Um, you also get like improved relations with a lot of factions, which is kind of odd for a Forces of Chaos faction. And you get additional allegiance points gained as well. So you can also use these allegiance points and proliferate cults. So these cults end up building in different sections. So you see this kind of seductive influence that happens here. This is something that happens, whether you're doing diplomacy, fighting, just from corruption. There's quite a few ways to do this, but of all the different factions, it's only human, elves, or beastmen that are really, kind of vulnerable to this. One thing that you want to know about Ankari right away, Ankari has, quite a few good effects for fighting against elves. Reduces leadership, but gains increased experience every time you fight a new faction in battle. And Slaanesh has this ability when they get into a fight with somebody to seduce units, so you can remove particularly dangerous units from the enemy army. You can swap them over to your side for a cost of some money. So the one thing here, and we'll just move this cultist in here. This will go, and we'll just show what this looks like. So we're attacking Krace, and so you can see that we have the seduce units option. So I can click here, and I could actually, seduce, well, only one unit at this point. So I could actually remove their archers from this battle if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that because don't need it. And again, off the beginning, I tend to fight a lot of these battles manually, but here we'll take a few extra devotees, that sounds fine. And then we do want to fight there, I think, too, but for now, I want to start a little bit slow because one of the things that Slaanesh struggles with early on, and you can already see, is the income that they earn. So these units right here, these daemonettes, are really quite powerful in the early game. These shielded guys too are quite good against the elves because they don't take as much damage from missiles. So in the early game you want to get kind of a solid army, but you want to be making sure that you don't lose the fiends. The fiends are really quite good, especially in the early game. One of the big things that you want to focus on to start with, because your starting position is like, honestly, it's kind of good and it's kind of bad. It's bad because you start with only like a minor settlement. It's pretty good because the only faction you're really up against is Krace, and they're pretty weak off the bat. But there are a lot of other dangerous factions close by. So like Alariel is over here. You've got um, Eltharion, and you've got Tyrion down here. So there are a lot of dangerous factions over in this area, so you want to be particularly careful of that. One thing that I like to do with this faction relatively early on is not even worry about really developing this area, just making sure that I don't lose it. So I tend to add walls to this place pretty early on, and I tend to upgrade this because this is our main, spot that we've got at this point. Ideally, we want to take this, which is the rest of this province. We want to take Elysia and Toracare, but this shrine is the only starting position. These guys over here, it's actually quite interesting because these guys start really strong, but basically everybody picks fights with them. So depending on how things are going over here, one of your options is to finish off Krace in the early game and then pick a fight here. These guys also tend to be, reasonably strong off the beginning of the game. So it's it tends to be kind of a tough starting position in some cases. You can see right now they're not very strong, but as you conquer these, they tend to build up their strength a little bit better. You do actually have some non-aggression pacts as well with certain factions. So one of them is the Cult of Pleasure. So this is Marathi, who's over here. She definitely likes having you around because you are causing a bunch of problems for the elves. I tend to like to improve the number of devotees I get, and we'll show off one of the mechanics in a second. You have a lot of options with Nkari at the beginning in terms of what you can actually research. This one is pretty decent. It just improves the amount of corruption that you put into sections. You have some of these upkeep reducing ones. Those are pretty good early on, as well as just increasing your the amount of money you get from looting, sacking, or raising settlements. I just about always tend to go over in this direction because one of the major things that Nkari struggles with early on is money. Reducing the cost of every building by 15% is super strong, so doing that early is a really good idea. I like to improve mobility there as well, and then because Nkari is one of the factions that's participating in the Great Game, you eventually will get access to the Unholy Manifestations. We can't do anything with them right now, but let's just take a look at the victory conditions here as well, because you want to basically destroy or vassalize the following factions. This is Alariel, Tyrion, and Altharion. These are basically factions that are all in this area. The early game for Slaanesh involves taking this horseshoe, taking Ulthuan. There is also the Shrine of Asuryan, which is over in this direction, and that is kind of your initial gameplay. Longer gameplay just focuses on taking pretty much all of these areas here, and you'll see a lot of these places. The only one that is in this section here is this Tor Anlek. You want to basically take all of Ulthuan. That's like your #1 goal with this faction. Now, what we'll do here is we'll just advance one turn and we'll talk about the disciple army. So if you have a good number of devotees, a disciple army can kind of give your faction a really sudden boost to its power, and can be really useful for taking settlements that maybe you would really struggle with your current forces, and this can kind of spawn an additional army that will help you. One of the other reasons to take a little bit more of a slow start approach with Nkari is because of the corruption. The more corruption you have in areas, the better off you are. For them, it's the Slaanesh corruption. So, if you look at this, you start actually quite low, and it provides increased income, more control, increases your budget for different things. So one of the things I'm going to come do is, normally a lot of people would go over here. I'm actually going to come directly for this, knowing that I'm not going to be able to. So you can see it's a close defeat, and that's okay. What I'm going to do instead is, now I'm kind of in the area, I'm going to summon a disciple army. So right away we've got another small army here, and we'll see if that's enough for us. So we've got this section here, and basically you can use these disciple armies. I'm not going to fight this battle, but you can get the point. These disciple armies can basically reinforce your forces on short notice, so they're really good for either kind of attacking a section quite early, and you can see that the disciple army is actually half as large as the original force. So that's kind of a good thing to keep in mind. One thing that I'm going to do with these guys is just put them here, let them do that, because you can actually get devotees from raiding as well. And we'll see, these guys might come out and attack us, but really, generally speaking, this is your first area that you can fight in. I'm actually going to abandon the siege with Ankari because I want to go into this, and I'm going to actually attack with these guys, who are just going to continue the siege there. And we'll see if they pop out and decide to try to knock us out there. And that's kind of a really early on guide for the Ankari's faction. It's honestly, it can be a bit of a tough start depending on if you get ganged up on at the beginning, but I tend to, generally speaking, work my way over to the right and just slowly swallow the elves factions. You want to continually push them. Going around the edges to get to the inner ring is often better than trying to punch through, because the gates tend to have fairly large garrisons in them, and you can't field very large armies to start with, purely because, so here we've got actually a Pyrrhic victory, and we wouldn't have been able to do that without the Disciple army. So we're going to do that, and we are actually going to immediately loot and occupy this settlement. And so right away we've been able to take this region early on, really quite a good thing for us. We've got the ability to go and take this area as well in a couple of turns, and that's just a pretty strong start for us. And you can see here, demonettes are quite good. You can look at their melee attack, melee defense early on. But that's kind of all I've got for this one, and the next place I would take is Elysia. So if you like the content, feel free to leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel for more in the future. Thanks for watching.